The world before the Incas. Long before the rise of the Inca Empire, the Andes nurtured a rich mosaic of civilizations, each leaving a profound and lasting imprint on the land and its people. Among the earliest were the Chavín, whose cultural influence began over 2,500 years before the Inca emerged. Centered at Chavín de Huántar, this society built intricate temples and carved stone artworks depicting mythical beings, hybrids of human and animal forms that reflected their spiritual worldview. As the Chavín influence faded, the Moche civilization flourished along Peru's northern arid coast between 100 and 700 CE. The Moche were brilliant engineers who transformed deserts into fertile farmland through extensive irrigation systems. Their distinctive stepped pyramid temples, such as the Huaca del Sol, served as ceremonial and administrative hubs. Art and medicine reached impressive heights under the Moche. Their pottery vividly captured scenes of daily life, mythology, and even surgical procedures. Remarkably, Moche surgeons practiced trepanation, brain surgery using obsidian tools, with many patients surviving, showcasing a medical knowledge that surpassed even some 19th century practices. Farther south, the Nazca culture left an enduring and enigmatic legacy between 200 BCE and 600 CE. Their vast Nazca lines, geoglyphs carved into the desert floor, depict animals, plants, and geometric designs only fully visible from the air. The purpose of these colossal artworks remains debated. Were they religious paths, offerings to the gods, or astronomical calendars? Whatever their use, they exemplify the Nazca's extraordinary interaction with the environment. Meanwhile, in the Andean highlands near Lake Titicaca, the Tiwanaku civilization rose to prominence. Known for their precision stone architecture, Tiwanaku engineers built massive temples and cities without mortar. Their innovations extended to agriculture as well. They created raised fields bordered by canals, which stored solar heat during the day and protected crops from nighttime frost, an ingenious adaptation to the harsh high-altitude climate. The Wari Empire, which thrived from 600 to 1100 CE near modern-day Cuzco, is often considered the most direct precursor to the Inca. The Wari developed administrative and infrastructural systems that the Inca would later refine and expand. Their worldview emphasized harmony with nature, embedding human society within a sacred landscape, a concept known as Aini, the principle of reciprocity and communal balance. This belief system helped unify communities across deserts, valleys, and mountains. Myths of origin and the sun god. In the heart of the Andes, myth and divine intervention shaped not only the Inca worldview, but the very landscapes they considered sacred. One of the most revered stories begins at Lake Titicaca, the highest navigable lake in the world. From its glistening waters, Manco Capac and Mama Oclo emerged, sent by Inti, the sun god, with a divine mission to bring order to the world, teach humanity agriculture, and establish laws. Their journey was guided by celestial purpose, to find fertile land where they would found civilization. But this myth was more than just a tale of beginnings. It offered the Inca a sacred origin, legitimizing their divine connection to the Andes and reinforcing their right to rule. Another powerful version of their origin traces back to Tambo Toco, a sacred cave near Tampu. According to legend, the first Incas emerged from this cave, symbolically born from the earth itself. The cave had 3 openings, interpreted as portals from which the ancestors of Inca kin groups emerged. From a central window came Manco Capac and his siblings, chosen by the gods to lead humankind. Central to all these stories was Inti, the sun god. The Incas called themselves Intipchurin, sons of the sun. This title wasn't symbolic. It was the foundation of their authority. The Sapa Inca, or supreme ruler, was viewed not as a mortal king, but as a living deity, the direct descendant of Inti. His rule was sacred, commanding loyalty even from recently conquered peoples who may have otherwise resisted. Divine ancestry united the diverse Andean cultures under a single spiritual and political banner. Sun worship permeated every aspect of Inca life. The Coricancha, or Golden Temple, in Cusco stood as the most revered space in the empire. Once adorned with gleaming sheets of gold, the temple honored Inti with architecture that aligned precisely with solstices and equinoxes. On specific days, sunlight would pass through its carefully positioned windows to illuminate sacred statues and altars, symbolizing the moment when heaven touched earth. Perhaps most fascinating of all is how these myths, while spiritual, carry threads of historical truth. Modern archaeology suggests that the migration paths described in these stories reflect actual patterns of Andean settlement and Inca expansion. Tambo Toco, for instance, may symbolize real migrations during the rise of the Inca state. The ceremonial sites and settlements found along these routes suggest the myths served as oral records, preserving history through storytelling. Early Inca rulers and the rise of power. In the rugged heartland of the Andes, the early Inca rulers began the slow and deliberate task of shaping a society capable of thriving in one of the world's most demanding environments. Though often described as semi-legendary figures, straddling the line between history and myth, their actions laid the vital foundations for what would eventually become one of the most powerful empires in the Americas. Sinchi Roca, the son of Manco Capac, is remembered for a relatively peaceful reign. Rather than pursuing conquest, he focused on expanding agricultural practices in the fertile Cusco Valley, securing a stable food supply for his growing community. He also introduced the strategic use of marriage alliances, a diplomatic tool that would become a hallmark of Inca statecraft. His successor, Loc Yupanqui, continued these efforts, focusing on consolidating local power rather than expanding the territory. During his reign, irrigation systems were improved, enhancing agricultural productivity in the high-altitude terrain. While he sought to assert dominance over neighboring tribes, these attempts led to small-scale conflicts rather than widespread victories. At this point in history, Cusco remained a modest city-state, surrounded by rivals and potential allies. The fourth ruler, Maida Capac, marked the beginning of a shift in Inca ambition. A skilled leader and warrior, he extended Inca influence slightly beyond the valley through early military campaigns. He also initiated the construction of fortifications around Cusco, signaling a growing awareness of defense and a readiness for territorial conflict. These were modest steps, but they foreshadowed the militarization and strategy that would define the Inca Empire's later expansion. A true turning point came under Inca Roca, a ruler credited with laying the formal structures of the future Inca state. He is especially remembered for establishing the Yachahuasi, or houses of learning, where the sons of Inca nobles were educated in administration, religion, and governance. These institutions emphasized oral history, as the Incas had no written language. Knowledge was preserved and transmitted through songs, storytelling, and quipus, intricately knotted strings used for record-keeping. Though still not fully understood, quipus demonstrate the Incas' sophisticated, if enigmatic, communication systems. As the Incas engaged more frequently with neighboring tribes, they faced formidable opponents such as the Chancas, whose military strength rivaled that of the early Incas. These repeated clashes, while not always favorable to the Incas, honed their military discipline and deepened their understanding of strategy, lessons that would serve them well in future conquests. Another key figure of this era was Capac Yupanqui, a leader known for his ambition and vision. He led one of the earliest recorded expeditions beyond the Cusco Valley, signaling a shift from defensive survival to proactive exploration and conquest. Though limited in scope, these efforts demonstrated a growing awareness of the region's political landscape and a desire to extend influence. What stands out about this early period is not the scale of Inca achievements, but the methodical way they laid the groundwork for the empire to come. Roads were constructed to connect scattered settlements, allowing for the movement of goods, troops, and information. Alliances, whether forged through diplomacy or warfare, helped secure regional support. Religious rituals, including seasonal festivals and ancestor worship, fostered unity, and reinforced the community's shared identity. The role of the Ayllu in Andean society. At the heart of Inca civilization was the Ayllu, a tightly knit kinship group that formed the foundation of daily life in a larger imperial structure. More than just an extended family, each Ayllu functioned as a self-sustaining community, collectively managing land, labor, and resources. Members of an Ayllu shared responsibilities, planting and harvesting crops, herding animals, celebrating festivals, and supporting one another during times of hardship. This deep-rooted system of mutual obligation ensured not only survival, but social cohesion. The principle of reciprocity, or Aini, structured every interaction, creating a society where giving and receiving were equally valued. Each Ayllu was led by a Karaka, a local leader who served as both a political and spiritual figure. The Karaka oversaw land distribution, resolved disputes, and coordinated the community's contributions to the state. Crucially, Karakas also maintained religious traditions, acting as mediators between their Ayllu and local deities. Every Ayllu had its own sacred lands, rituals, and spiritual guardians, known as Huacas, reinforcing the sacred bond between people and their environment. Rather than taxation through money, the Inca system relied on labor contributions, the foundation of its economy. Central to this was the MITA system, a state-mandated labor obligation in which each able-bodied member of an Ayllu worked on state projects for part of the year. This labor was not seen as a burden, but as a duty rooted in reciprocal ethics. In return, the state offered protection, maintained public infrastructure like roads and terraces, and stored surplus food to guard against famine. MITA was more than labor. It was a social contract that bound individuals to the larger community and the empire, ensuring productivity, unity, and survival. The Ayllu also played a vital role in resource management through a strategy known as the vertical archipelago. The Andes' extreme altitudinal variation created a patchwork of ecological zones, each capable of producing different crops and goods. By managing access to multiple zones, lowland maize fields, mid-altitude potato terraces, and highland pastures for llamas, Ayllus could diversify their production and remain self-sufficient in an otherwise harsh landscape. Remarkably, the Inca Empire operated without currency. Labor and reciprocity, not money, were the engines of exchange. Goods and services were distributed through a carefully managed redistributive economy, coordinated by the state and rooted in Ayllu cooperation. Even today, in remote Andean regions, echoes of the Ayllu system remain. Many communities still practice forms of communal labor and mutual aid, preserving traditions that have withstood colonialism and modern economic pressures. Ultimately, the true strength of the Inca Empire did not lie solely in its roads, armies, or wealth. It lay in the Ayllu, the social nucleus of Andean life. This deeply rooted kinship system enabled the empire to govern vast, diverse populations while respecting local identities. It was the communal foundation that provided the loyalty, cohesion, and resilience necessary to rule one of history's most extraordinary civilizations. Military campaigns and conquest strategy. The Inca military was more than a fighting force. It was a reflection of the empire itself, highly organized, ideologically driven, and deeply embedded in the structure of society. Under the leadership of Pachacuti and his successors, military service became a civic duty. Every able-bodied man from the Ayllu kinship group was expected to contribute, not as a burden, but as part of his reciprocal obligation to the state. Soldiers underwent rigorous training and were armed with weapons tailored to the challenges of the rugged Andean landscape: slings, clubs, spears, and bolas. But what truly set the Inca military apart was its integration of discipline, engineering, logistics, and belief. War for the Inca wasn't just about expanding borders, it was a sacred mission. The Sapa Inca, believed to be the son of the sun god Inti, carried the divine responsibility to bring order to chaotic or rebellious lands. In this worldview, conquest was not aggression, it was cosmic duty. Soldiers marched not just for glory or gain, but to fulfill a spiritual mandate, spreading the light of Inti across the Andes. Those who resisted faced severe consequences. Entire communities were uprooted and relocated through the Mitmas system, a policy designed to suppress rebellion and encourage cultural integration. Resistant leaders were removed, and their people were dispersed across the empire, severing bonds of insurrection while embedding them into the imperial structure. This wasn't just retribution, it was strategic assimilation. After conquest, the Incas acted swiftly to restructure newly acquired territories. Populations were redistributed, infrastructure improved, and imperial administration swiftly installed. This ensured that conquered lands were not just claimed, but absorbed into the empire system. One of the most effective weapons in the Inca arsenal was their mastery of terrain. The Andes were their homeland, and they used the mountains to their advantage. The Inca road network, with its suspension bridges and way stations, allowed for rapid troop movements. In retreat, they would sabotage bridges behind them, luring pursuers into dangerous landscapes where ambushes were planned with deadly precision. This success was no accident. It came from a carefully orchestrated strategy that fused diplomacy, engineering, religious ideology, and military might. The Inca didn't merely conquer, they integrated. They transformed fragmented tribes and regions into a centralized, unified state governed by shared rituals, infrastructure, and leadership. Every campaign further expanded not only the territorial reach of the empire, but also its ideological framework. Warfare was both a political and sacred instrument, used to construct one of the most complex, resilient, and interconnected societies in pre-Columbian history. Quechua, Quipus, and the Inca bureaucracy. In a vast and rugged empire like the Incas, effective communication was both a challenge and a necessity. The Incas met that challenge with a combination of language and innovation that became the foundation of one of the most efficient bureaucracies in the ancient world. At the heart of this system was Quechua, a language not originally created by the Incas, but adopted and standardized during their rise to power. Already spoken by many communities across the Central Andes, Quechua became the linguistic thread that wove together the diverse ethnicities of the empire. The Incas recognized its unifying potential and made it the official language of Tawantinsuyo, the Inca realm. Despite lacking a written script, the Incas developed an ingenious solution to record and manage their growing empire, the quipu. These devices, bundles of colored, knotted cords, form the backbone of the Inca administrative system. At first glance, they may seem simple, but each knot, twist, and color represented specific quantitative data: census records, agricultural yields, tribute obligations, and labor quotas under the MITA system. The true power of the quipu lay in its combination of memory and material. These records were not standalone artifacts. They were interpreted by quipu Kamiyuk, a specialized class of trained officials. These men committed vast datasets to memory and could decode the knotted strings with extraordinary precision. Though their exact techniques remain partially mysterious, research increasingly suggests that quipus may have also held narrative or phonetic information, possibly serving as a symbolic form of writing. If proven, this would mean the Incas had developed a unique hybrid of oral and physical communication, one that bridged the gap between spoken language and written record in a society without a formal alphabet. Together, Quechua and the quipu became the twin pillars of Inca governance. Through them, the Incas achieved what many literate civilizations struggled with: the ability to administer a vast, diverse empire without losing cohesion. Their system, rooted in oral culture but enhanced by complex tools, stands as a model of administrative ingenuity. Even today, Quechua is spoken by millions across South America, a living legacy of the Inca vision. And quipus remain an enduring mystery, a silent, knotted testament to a people who once ruled the spine of the continent with skill, precision, and unity. In a land of towering mountains, treacherous terrain, and cultural diversity, the Incas did more than build roads and conquer lands. They built a system. a bureaucracy without paper, and an empire stitched together by language and thread. The death of the last Inca, Tupac Amaru. Tupac Amaru, the final ruler of the Neo-Inca state, became a powerful symbol of resistance and resilience during the final days of the fallen empire. Long after the Spanish had claimed victory in most of the Andes, a jungle stronghold known as Vilcabamba, established by Manco Inca, remained the last bastion of Inca independence. From this remote fortress, Tupac Amaru led a small but defiant group that continued to reject Spanish rule. By the early 1570s, Spanish authorities had grown increasingly impatient with this lingering defiance. Viceroy Francisco de Toledo, determined to eliminate all traces of Inca resistance, launched a full-scale military campaign against Vilcabamba. In 1572, Spanish forces invaded the Neo-Inca state with superior numbers, advanced weaponry, and a clear objective: crush the last remnants of the empire. Tupac Amaru's followers fought with courage and cunning, using the thick jungle terrain to their advantage. Steep mountain trails, dense forests, and the absence of roads slowed the Spanish advance, but not for long. The empire's final defenses eventually crumbled under the weight of Spanish firepower and persistence. Vilcabamba fell. Tupac Amaru fled deeper into the jungle with a small band of loyal followers. But the wilderness that had once protected his ancestors became a trap. Spanish troops tracked him down, and outnumbered and isolated, he was captured and taken to Cusco. The trial was little more than a performance. On September 24th, 1572, Tupac Amaru was publicly beheaded in the central plaza of Cusco, his death witnessed by a crowd of indigenous onlookers. The execution was intended to crush hope and extinguish resistance. But it did the opposite. Legacy of the Inca Empire in the modern world. The fall of the Inca Empire did not mark its disappearance. On the contrary, its influence still pulses through the Andes, not as memory, but as lived reality. Perhaps the most enduring legacy is language. Quechua, once the unifying tongue of Tawantinsuyo, remains the most widely spoken indigenous language in the Americas. In villages, homes, markets, and even schools across Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, and beyond, Quechua is not a relic. It's a living bond with Inca ancestors. In agriculture, the Incas left behind techniques that remain vital today. Their terrace farming methods, ingeniously designed to grow crops on steep mountain slopes, continue to prevent erosion, conserve water, and sustain food production in regions where modern machinery often fails. These ancient systems have become increasingly important as Andean farmers adapt to climate change. In some areas, Inca irrigation canals still function, centuries after they were carved into the mountains. The Incas' architectural legacy is also visibly embedded in the Andean landscape. In cities like Cusco, colonial buildings stand atop Inca foundations, a literal and symbolic layering of civilizations. The Inca stonework beneath is so precise that even today, a blade of grass cannot slip between the stones. These foundations have withstood countless earthquakes, often surviving when colonial structures above them have crumbled. Cultural and spiritual traditions also endure, often blending with Christian practices imposed during colonization. In Cusco, the annual Inti Raymi festival still honors the Inca sun god Inti, though now framed within a hybrid religious identity. Across the Andes, dances, rituals, and celebrations reflect this fusion of Catholicism and Inca cosmology, where the old ways continue beneath new forms. One of the most powerful Inca ideals to survive is the principle of Aini, the concept of reciprocity. Rooted in mutual aid, Aini governs everything from community farming to festival preparation. When someone helps a neighbor, that assistance is expected to be returned, not as obligation, but as harmony. In remote Andean villages, Aini still defines social relationships, embodying the collective strength that once powered an empire.